Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this day we have to meet together as a community. We're grateful for this wonderful area we have to live in and for the moisture we have received recently. We're also grateful for the wonderful citizens and all that they do and their service to our city and to their neighbors. We ask for thy guidance tonight in this meeting that we'll be able to make decisions that will benefit them the most possible and be able to make Santa Clara to continue to be such a great city. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jarrett. Do we have any citizen communications or appearances? Anybody here tonight not on the advertised agenda? Don't see too many. Okay, we'll move on to conflicts and disclosures. Council, is there anything on the agenda tonight that you would have a conflict of interest that you need to state that for get on the minutes? Even I don't have anything on there tonight. Okay, we'll go into the working agenda. We don't have any public hearings scheduled.
No.
And so we'll go to the consent agenda, council. You've got before you the approval of the claims and minutes, the minutes of February 10th, 2021, Santa Clara City Regular City Council, and the February 10th, 2021 executive session, and the claims through February 24th. You can see the calendar of events. Remind everybody, tomorrow is the budget retreat beginning at 10:30. We got city council work meeting on the 3rd and regular city council meetings on the 10th and 24th of March. And we need to set a public hearing to receive public input on amending the Santa Clara City subdivision fees for city inspections and annexations for March 10th, 2021 at 5 p.m. Any questions on any of those items, council? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Got a motion by Denny and a second by Jarrett to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any question on that motion? Money item with the claims. All in favor, say aye. Wendell?
Aye.
Denny?
Aye.
Jarrett?
Aye.
Lena?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Passes unanimous. Thank you, council. Item C1, Zach Renstrom, introduction and water district update. I think everybody knows Zach. We want to welcome him out here. We appreciate him coming. I've asked him to kind of come and bring the council to speed on the activities that are going on right now with the Water Conservancy District, and maybe give us a little info on what's going to be happening.
Okay, I take the mask off here.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you, Zach.
Before I get started, let me just introduce myself. Like you said, I think I know everyone here actually pretty well. Zach Renstrom with the Water District, General Manager there. And as of June, a citizen of Santa Clara City. So we got here. So before I start, I just want to show this little clip.
Just remember, if we run out of water, you run out of water.
That's true. Very true. So I hope the speakers play on this, but we'll see how it goes.
The forecast, plenty of sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70. Cloudy and continuing windy overnight with a low of 47. Cloudy with a few sunny breaks and not as warm tomorrow with a high of 96. With the winds out of the east at 14 miles per hour, it's currently 75 degrees.
So I think that helps illustrate the importance of water and how nothing really does replace water. So let me get this going. Perfect. Some of you probably know the history, but I wanted to go back to some of those that don't. In the early part of this county, almost every little community that was settled was because of water. And if you go back and look at the city, they would say, well, we settled here because there was good water here or related to that water. And those early pioneers, it is inspirational what they did. You go and look at the canals that they dug by hand and shovels. In fact, at the Water District, we have a shovel and half of it is completely worn out because everything was done by hand. And it was amazing what they did. And even the tunnels they blasted through to get water to their citizens. But it was a very difficult time. The population in the county kind of stabilized there for a while. Then in the 60s, things started to change and people were talking about it. Some private citizens actually went to a district court judge and said, we need a water district. It was a new thing that was starting to be developed in Western law, developing water districts. And so private citizens petitioned the court, and the court actually created the water district. Some things changed over the years with the Utah state law of how it's ran, but that's pretty much our foundation. Our start was from a district court judge. In the 70s, growth really started taking off in this area, and that was because of two things. Is first of all, air conditioning became feasible in residential homes, and second, of I-15. And so at that time in the 70s, there was a lot of talk about what was called the Dixie Project. And the Dixie Project was had a lot of parts to it, but the big part of the Dixie Project was actually building some large reservoirs to handle water into the future. And it was going to be a large federal water project, but due to several reasons, it kind of fell apart and died. So when that happened, all of a sudden in our community, we started seeing headlines like this that talked about the city struggling to meet water needs. And so as you imagine, this is in the early 80s, and the cities were panicking at that time of where they're going to get enough water for their citizens. And there was even some discussions like Ivans was going to go all the way out to Beaver Dam Wash and build a very large pipeline out there to Beaver Dam Wash. But Ivans was so small at the time, they didn't have the economic means to go and bond to pay for such a large infrastructure project. And the same thing happened was that the little cities independently didn't have the resources to build a big project to get these things online. So at that time, the water district really, that was, even though it was created in the 60s, really in the late 70s and early 80s, that's when the water district came to really be what it is today. So essentially, the county commissioners at the time went to a gentleman by the name of Ron Thompson and said, we are facing moratoriums of growth in our county. We can't have this done. And basically told him to go get it done. And he accepted the challenge, and he got it done. And he stepped on a lot of toes. He stomped on a lot of feet, but he got it done. And pretty much, if you've moved into our community, when I say community, Washington County in the last 25 years, it's because of his sole actions to get that done. And he got Quail Reservoir built. They had talked about Quail Reservoir for a long time, and nobody could get it done. And he stepped up and he got it done. And then he brought on Sand Hollow, and there was a lot of steps that were done. And once again, it was because it was the entire county that was trying to get this thing done. And there was a lot of discussion about why should enterprise help pay for this reservoir? But even people up in enterprise said, hey, listen, we will benefit if St. George economics grows and a lot of our citizens can come down there and work, we'll benefit up in enterprise and vice versa throughout the county. So it worked really well. There were still some things that need to be worked out. And so in the early 2000s, the regional water supply agreement was signed by the county. And basically it was this, that we're going to start pulling our resources together and moving water around. And why that was so critical is right here, this is Quail Creek and what we call the Quail Creek Diversion Dam. So that thing that's being built there with the big crane, that essentially is located right by the city of Virgin. And I now take water from that area. So I take water from Virgin City and I transfer that all the way over here into Santa Clara City. So I looked in our records right before we came in. Last year, you got about 15% of your water from the water district. So that means 15% of the water district, 15% of Santa Clara River, or 15% of the drinking water here in Santa Clara came from that structure right there all the way over in Virgin. But we needed that flexibility. We needed the communities to be able to work together. We needed the communities to say, okay, we're going to move water here and not fight anymore. And it's worked really well. It's a contractual agreement that we have with the cities. And because of that, now the water district directly connects to 90% of the population. So 90% of the population in Washington County at some points drinks water that's provided by the water district. And the agreement, what's nice about it is it lays out how this is going to be funded, how it's operated, how we're going to do our construction and the funding, and it's spelled out. And every month we get together and we talk about the water projects and things that are going on in the city and what we can do to help. And then quarterly, we bring the mayors in also and have a bigger meeting. Last year with COVID, we weren't able to do that, but with the restrictions lightening up, we'll get back to doing that. The main reason why the district came to be and what we're doing is because of our massive population growth here. And so this shows from 2005 and on. And there's something unique about this I want to show. So the blue line is kind of the census population. That is the population that the census comes and says we have. And at the district, we always noticed, and I also noticed at the county, there was a gap with all the other numbers, and we couldn't figure that out. So the University of Utah actually came up with our growth numbers, and we went back to the university as a district and said, there's a problem here. Your numbers aren't adding up. And what they came back and what we concluded is we have a large secondary population that comes and utilizes our services here. So we asked them to give us an estimate of that. And so they went, did a bunch of research, and they came back and they said, yep, you're right. Your population is actually 26% higher than you estimated. And also that kind of coincides very closely. If you look at the number of secondary homes that are listed as secondary homes with the county assessors, it's about 25%. And so it adds up very nicely. So so we plan ahead. And the other reason why we go all the way out here to 2065 is these projects are generational. So as a civil engineer, when someone comes to with a building project, it's usually about a 2 to 3, maybe a 5-year planning. Road projects, they might go out 10 years, but with water projects, they really are generational. So I often like to point out that the only reason I was able to move here in 2003 is because when I was in the 3rd grade, they built Quail Reservoir. If it wasn't for what happened in 1980s, it allowed me 20 years later to move in. And so the things that we're doing with water right now are not necessarily for us today. It really is for our children and those people that are coming. And it just takes that long. The 2 reservoirs we're hoping to go online. One was Toker Reservoir up by in Tokerville. The original study on that was done about 25 years ago. Cove Reservoir, that's now been pushed out another 5 years. The original studies in that were done in the late 90s. The Lake Powell pipeline that we've been talking about for a long time, the original studies of that was also done in the 90s. And so these projects take 20, sometimes 30 years to bring online. So with that, we always really look far, far in the future. But I want to tell you who's really control of that is it really is the cities. We in developing these graphs of population is we look at your master plans and see what you as a city want. And so we take all the master plans from the cities and we look at that and we say, okay, they're going to zone this an R10, or it depends on city what it is. And we'll estimate the density of that. And then we'll estimate how much water we need to supply to that community and the population to it. And so, you're really in charge. But we also look at other things when we try to come up with our long-term projects. So I like this one because it really describes what the roles are. And so as a district, my main goal is to sell water to the cities. That's the vast majority of it, is we just wholesale it to the cities as they need it. And then it's the municipality its job is to go out and do the retail distribution center, put in the meters, read the meters, and do the billing. With conservation, our role is through education and rebates. And so we have our desert garden that we invite people up. We teach classes where people come and learn about their what they can do to save water. We have the rebates they can do, but the real enforcement comes to the city. And it really depends on what the city wants for their community. If they really want to go to very strong water conservation and very strict ordinances with that, it's up to the city to implement that. And it's also up to the city to enforce that. And so like even today, I was on the radio and somebody called and said, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? And I says, it's not up to me. I have nothing to do with that. It really belongs at the city level. So I encourage them to call their city. And then with growth, we do nothing with growth. We don't encourage growth, but we don't encourage it or decrease it or anything. We simply respond to it. And it really comes back to the cities of what you want your community to like. If you want growth, then my job is to make sure that you have a water to allow that to happen. But if you came back and said, hey, we're good, we're going to cut down on growth, then I would simply respond to that and make my project smaller. We get beat up because of a lot of water conservation, but I think we don't get enough credit for that. And so we were the first one in the state of Utah to meet the governor's goals for water conservation. We've cut our water use by 30% per capita, which is the highest in the state of Utah. We have some aggressive goals to move forward with water conservation. And all of this has been done through just education, through rebates, and kind of just encouraging our citizens to do that without having the heavy stick that government can sometimes have. In some areas of the Western United States, they have very, very strict rules. They have water cops that drive up and down looking for water violators and issue large fines. And our community, we haven't had to do that. And we've responded to that. Here's a small list of some of the projects we're doing for water conservation and some things. Pretty much if we hear about a water conservation project or something we can do, or hear something, we will investigate it. Every 5 years, we update that plan. We're in the process of updating that right now, and we invite the cities to come in and help us because we only have so much money. And so we say, okay, what is the best way to spend this amount of money? And what would the cities like us to do? Would you want us to focus on toilet rebates? Do you want us to focus on education classes? Do you want us to focus on, the public outreach to the schools? And so our conservation plan is really driven a lot by what the cities have requested. So this is a game that I like to play because I get beat up, and I'm sure, Utah gets beat up a lot on how much water we use. And so we often hear that we're the highest water users in the United States. And so I say, well, that depends on how you measure it. So this is the scenario. So I'm going to assume that we have one home here, and we have one individual living in that home, and he uses 5 gallons of treated water for indoor use, showers, bathrooms, toilets. Then in the front of his yard, he also uses some city water, culinary water for the grass out front and some landscaping. So he uses 5 there. But in the back, he has a small little area that he has a small garden, and he uses a secondary water system for that, untreated water. So my question for you guys is, how much water has this individual used that day? So I'm going to make it even simpler. I'm going to give you multiple choice. I did better with multiple choice in school. So my question is how much water did that individual use that day? So raise a hand, who says 15? Okay, who would say 10? Who would say 5 gallons? Okay, would anybody in this room say that they use 3.3? So now I will say, as an engineer, I hate this. This drives me nuts. As an attorney, I love this because the answer is they're all correct. And I got to explain this to you. So in our county, we would say this person has used 15 gallons of water because we would say there's one person, 5 plus 5 plus 5 divided by 1 is 15. It's pretty simple. Other areas do not count the untreated water use. So they would say that the water that was used on the garden, that is not city water, that's not culinary water, so we're not even going to count that. So this individual only used 10 gallons. So in other municipalities, they would say 5. And the reason why they would say 5 is because they would come in and say, listen, we don't count the untreated water. That's secondary irrigation. We don't count irrigation. And all the water that this individual used inside this home doesn't count. And the reason why is because when that individual takes a shower, that water comes back to us. And so really that shower shouldn't count because, yeah, we gave him 5 gallons of water, but he gave us 5 gallons back through the sewer line. So we're not going to count any indoor use water. So this person only used 5 gallons of water. And that's how they come up with that number. So the 3.3, how did somebody come up with that? So the municipality that uses that, they come in and they say, okay, we're going to count the 5 gallons of indoor use. We're going to count the 5 gallons of outdoor use. So we're going to say this scenario used 10 gallons of water. But we're not going to count the one individual. In our community, we say that there's 3 individuals per home per our census. So we're actually going to take the 10 gallons and divide that by 3. And they come up with 3.3 gallons. And so when you hear numbers of like, oh, in Las Vegas, they're only using like 120 gallons of water per day per person, this is why. And then when they say, well, in St. George, you guys are using 275. This is the accounting that's gone on. And as someone that practiced law in Las Vegas for several years, it doesn't surprise me that these numbers have been manipulated so much. So I hope that helps people because they don't understand why our water use is so high to other municipalities. So where are we in planning? Where are we going to get all this water for that growth? This is our plan. We have 28% of our current use, but we have some aggressive plans to start reusing our water. So right now, down the sewer treatment, the St. George sewer plant, we actually have a part of that plant is they'll take the sewer water and they will actually treat it and put chlorine in it and then actually pump it back into the irrigation system. So a lot of the golf courses will use that reclaimed water. Some of our parks use that reclaimed water, and we have aggressive plans to actually start to expand that. There is some ag conversion that we do. Now, as an individual that grew up milking Jersey cows, I will never go to a rancher and take his water or a farmer. Now, so the plan is not to go and force farmers out. And personally, I would never allow that to happen, or I'd fight for that farmer. However, as the land develops, so when these homes get converted to homes, or that farmer sells that land, then we do require that water when we can. The 10%, like I said, we have a couple of reservoir projects that were coming online. But then if you look at that graph, a lot of it is the Lake Powell pipeline. A lot, 34%. And then because we'll have that additional water here, that 11% up there is when expanding our sewer treatment plant systems up there. This is just a small list of our infrastructure. It's funny to see this because this graph was created 2 years ago and it's already outdated. We've got 2 storage water tanks coming online right now. We've got several more miles of pipe coming on. But we have to really keep up, and with the rapid growth coming on, we just have to keep up with it as fast as we can. This is the cost of our projects that we're looking at in the next 20 years. So about $1.6 billion. It was interesting because the Ash Creek project, that's the Tokerville Reservoir. Just if you go up Black Ridge, there's a reservoir up there, and it leaks water like a sieve, and it was never really designed to be a reservoir. And so we're taking that water and we're going to bring it back down to Tokerville through a pipeline and put it in a spot that's actually has a better geography for a reservoir. And we call it Ash Creek, or the Tokerville Reservoir. So right now it came in at, well, when we originally looked at it, was $41 million. But we just got a new cost estimate. Now it's $60 million. And so, Mayor Rosenberg, do you want to explain to people why engineers' estimates are only estimates and not factual? So all these costs we know have increased. Some of that has been just because of inflation, but some of it is just because with the growth, these contractors have so much work, they can be more, we're not getting as competitive bids going on right now. And I want to say this is a good example of what goes on with the water district and what's, I think, really positive we're doing in our community. So right now we have a line from our water treatment plant that pretty much comes up here, goes along Snow Canyon Parkway and goes up to Snow Canyon. And we mix that water up there in those wells to bring the arsenic level. And then it comes back into our Santa Clara and Ivins and everything. And that line it's getting close to its capacity. So St. George City and Washington City came to the water district and said, we're having problems with water down in the southern part of our communities. And so the water district recently has built this line out there in Winter Valley. And we're also building a water treatment plant right by Hurricane. And that should go online this summer. And so now we'll be supplying water to St. George City and Washington City. But what it's doing, though, is it's freeing up capacity in that line that's up in Santa Clara City. And so now we're able to bring more water in that line for Ivins and Santa Clara because there's less demand on that line from Washington and St. George. And that's what's neat about our system is I don't really look at city borders that close. I really look about where things are going and where can I move water. And so like with Tokerville Reservoir, even though that's kind of on the east side of the county, that's going to free up a lot of capacity in the system and allow me to push water over in this side of the county. And to have that flexibility has been very, very helpful. We have multiple wells going on, including even some just right up here. Sometimes we refer to it as the Kayenta wells. So Kayenta and Ivins, they have their own little water system and we supply all their water for them. And we have to redevelop those wells right there. Our water treatment plant, right now it's designed for 60 million gallons a day. But with the growth that's going on, we have to bump that up to 80 million gallons a day. And we're also looking at putting ozone in that. So right now we have multiple treatment systems of our water. And we'd like to add ozone for a couple reasons it would lower some of our costs, operating costs. It really does a really good job with odor and taste. And then to have just another process to clean our water is always helpful. So when we're trying to treat the water, there's multiple pathogens that we try to treat. And some of those pathogens respond better to certain treatments. So to have one more treatment in our train would just make sure it ensures our water is safe if things happen. The Lake Powell pipeline, we're still working very, very actively on that. That is really the key to our water future here in Washington County. And I believe you're all familiar with that, so I won't spend too much time on it. I do want to tell you that what happened is we sent an EIS out. We got 15,000 comments back for that. And we also got a letter from 6 basin states that said that they had a lot of questions with the Lake Powell pipeline. And so we're in the process of reaching out to those 6 basin states and answering those questions. We're also responding to some of the comments that came in and clarifying some of the things that we will hopefully hope the public understand what the process is all about. But with that, we hear a lot of people talk about the Colorado River and that there's no water there. And in reality, the Colorado River is the most reliable water source in the Western United States. If you look at the tree rings and what's happened, the Colorado River has always had water. And additional, 100 years ago, the state of Utah got a right from the other basin states to use a certain amount of allocation in that river. And Utah is not even coming close to using their full allocation. Other basin states are using their full allocation. In fact, some of the states have used over their allocations for many, many, many years. And they're finally actually trying to get to the point where they're just using their allocation. Utah's in a really good position because we haven't used our full allocation. We still have a lot. And with the Lake Powell pipeline coming on, so right now we're using about 63%. With the Lake Powell pipeline, we'll use about 5 to 6% more. And so there's still a lot of unused allocation in Utah. So as things move forward on the river, Utah's in a really good position to work with the other basin states saying, hey, if we all take haircuts or whatever the agreement is, Utah has that flexibility that we have and that the other states maybe not. With climate change, we talk a lot about what's going on with the climate, and it does make me nervous. It's undisputed fact that in the last 20 years, our region has been hotter and drier. We can see that, we measure that, and we know that. Now, the question is why. I won't get into that because there's a lot of different views out there, but we have seen that. And as someone in the water industry, I have to plan for kind of the worst case scenario. I can't assume. I'm actually a really positive guy, but when it comes to teenagers or planning with water, I'm actually quite negative. Sorry, I've got a 17-year-old home that I'm ready to sign up in the military. He actually came to me and said, I'll tell you, he came to me and says, this is the worst place to live in the whole world. And I said, hey, you're 17, and I think the Marine Corps would be great then, because if this is the worst place in the whole world, then the Marine Corps would be a better place to be. So let's go sign up. I called his bluff. And I'm telling you, if he would have said, I would have signed those papers and had him in boot camp as fast as I could have. But he decided that home wasn't the worst place in the world. So we have him for another year. But we have to plan on negative. I have to plan for a dry climate. I have to plan for rapid growth for our scenarios. And so we consider that a lot. And this isn't showing up. Well, I guess on the TV screens, it shows up a little bit. But this is the thing that makes me nervous. And so this was a presentation given in 2015 by Ron Thompson. And it shows our water use and where we're at. And we're coming to a point where if we don't get that Lake Powell pipeline online, we're going to have a serious discussion as a community. So right now we're kind of looking at about 2025 of being an area where the cities have to determine what they want to do. And like I said, it's up to the cities. I might come to you and say, okay, you only get a certain allocation of water and you decide what you want to do with that. Do you want people to have, their lawns in the front yard? Or do you want to do really strict watering restrictions so that frees up capacity for new people coming into the community? It'll have a tough discussion. Now, if the Lake Powell pipeline comes on board, then we'll secure our water rights in this county for another 40 to 50 years. I'm doing everything I can for the Lake Powell pipeline. I basically have multiple staff that's all they do is work on the Lake Powell pipeline. We have some of the best consultants in not only the nation but the world. In fact, a question came up about the quagga mussel, and somebody has some concerns about that. And so we went out and we said, okay, who is the quagga mussel expert? And we located a lady that's actually in Canada. And she's extremely knowledgeable about everything quagga. And she came and is consulted with us on how we deal with quagga mussels. And it's been nice to say, okay, we're going to not leave any stone unturned. We're going to look for this and we're going to make sure this is right. That was another thing of pulling back the EIS and doing a supplemental. We wanted to make sure every single question was answered, and not just answered but we wanted to make sure we talked to the expert about how we did that. And that's why it's pulled back. This current year has me nervous right now. So up in the mountains, we have what's called snow hotel sites, and it measures the snow, measures the temperature, and actually measures the soil on how much water's in the soil. And so we kind of focus on three main ones. So Guts Peak is located above Enterprise. Kolob kind of is right above Zions National Park. And then we have Gardner Peak, which is Pine Valley or Santa Clara River. So the dark blue is the average. The orange, and I guess it depends on your screen. The orange one is actually how much water is up there right now. And then the white is snow. And as you can see, we're barely about 50%. It kind of depends. Enterprise is a little bit lower. Kolob is about 50%, and Gardner Peak is about 50%. The thing that's making us really nervous about this year is the soil sensors. They have never recorded this low of levels. So those soil sensors have been up there for 20 years, and they monitor basically every day. They take a sample of how much that soil is. Well, about 2 weeks ago, we looked at that, and they've never been this low before. And what's tough about that is when that snow starts to melt, that soil sucks up that water. That's the first, they get it first. It just sucks it up. There's nothing we can do about it. So we predict what the runoff is, and we predict that off the past. And also we have a variable that comes up that's never been in our models before. And so now we're really nervous because we're like, we don't know what the runoff is going to be this year, because we don't know how much water that soil is going to suck up, because we've never been this low before. So it makes me nervous. Fortunately, our reservoirs are in really good position. So these are our reservoirs. Sand Hollow is about 90%, Kolob 60, and the rest are around 60. And so fortunately, we are coming into this year in a really good position in our reservoirs. We've been able to hold that water over. And also understand Hollow Reservoir, we have about 50 to 60,000 acre feet of water that we've allowed to percolate in that aquifer that we can now suck up if we needed to. So it's kind of good and bad. The good is our reservoirs are doing pretty good. The bad is we don't know what the runoff is going to be. Now that can change. If we get a couple of good storms in, it'll change that variable. If it goes the other way, it'll be really tough. The other thing that we're worried about is the last 2 years have been some of the hottest, driest summers that we've had for the monsoon season. So not last year, but the previous year, we actually made that a record, and it's not a good record, but we actually went 154 days without measurable rainfall in downtown St. George. So the longest in recorded history. And we see that at our water system. When it rains, I can almost tell when it's raining, because the demand on our system will almost instantly drop off at the water treatment plant. All of a sudden we'll see it and we'll adjust it. So even having 2 or 3 good monsoons, or 4 or 5 come in, it really helps. But then the big thing is those monsoon rains actually hit the higher elevations a little bit more and really allow that soil to suck up that water up there. And then when the snowpack comes, then that water flows off. Because Kolob and Pine Valley didn't get those monsoons, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing such dry soil conditions up there. And so we're nervous about this year, but we'll have to see. So pray for rain. This is a picture of Kolob that was just taken a little while ago, earlier this month. And so there's some snow up there. But 2 years ago, there was so much water that over to the right of that picture, that's overflow. There was so much snow in that you couldn't see the overflow, and now we can this year. So with that, I talk very fast and very quickly. So I want to open up to any questions. Or if you have any comments or things that you would like to know, I'd be happy to answer them now. Or if you don't want to ask a question now, I want you to know at any time, feel free to give me a call. Come up to the district, I'll give you a glass of water. We can sit down, we can talk about anything, or just give me a call on the phone. I try very, very hard to respond to every single email, every single phone call I get. I respond to everyone. And as individuals that are key to water and setting the policy for our county, I think it's essential that you as individuals have the correct information, and I'll do anything I can to do that. So, yes, Commissioner.
Zach,
Yes.
the communities have so much resource, and St. George, Washington, Santa Clara. Do you know when we're getting close to maxing out our resource in each community so that we can actually, as you discussed developing, understand where we need to be when it comes to developing for the future, depending on the resource we have?
So pretty much every community has maxed out their own personal water supply. So with Santa Clara, we're supplying 15% of your water. And we've noticed that as homes grow here, so does that. And so we go into every community and look at what your water supply is and say, okay, where are they at? So I will say Santa Clara, you guys are actually in one of the best positions. Whoever 30 years ago, I don't know if that was, I mean, it could have been you, Denny, or Commissioner, I don't know what to call it. President Drake. We had this discussion earlier. You guys did an excellent job of going up to Snow Canyon and tapping in those wells and getting water rights for your community. And it's been very good. But in those summer months, you guys don't have the capacity. And so that's where the district comes in and supplies that gap. Some communities are in a lot worse conditions than yours, but pretty much if there's a new home being built in our community, we're supplying the water district is supplying the water for that. And all the local municipalities have tapped out their water sources.
So with what you've got in storage that supplies this water, at what point, the 2025, is that the point where you're thinking your resource is also gone?
So what we're doing right now is we're going through a study and we're looking at that about what we can do and the steps we can do to push that out. We're also working with the state of Utah and the Division of Drinking Water because it's a number that we just don't want to come out and say, this is it. We want to make sure it goes. And it's a tough moving target because if all of a sudden construction slows down rapidly, like it did in 2008, then that number would instantly push out to 2030. If construction increases in speed, which some people are predicting, then that will come sooner than later. Also, how the cities respond. If they respond with aggressive conservation measures and other things that we can do, then we can probably push that out farther. So it's a little bit of a moving target. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from me about what we can do. And all I'll do is try to give you the best information. And then as the city council, you can decide what you want to do.
Zach, do you anticipate any restrictions, mandatory restrictions or cutbacks this year with what's going on?
So I think the farmers, well, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Santa Clara, how that works. A lot of the farmers on the Santa Clara, and it depends on what irrigation company you're with, they will definitely see restrictions on it. For drinking water, I think we'll be okay this year. It really depends on if we don't get any more snowfall, I think we might be looking at that. But if we have a couple of spring rainfalls that come in, then we'll be okay. And just know how that works is I'm going to come to you, Mayor, and say, hey, we're getting to an area of critical concern, and then the city will have to take those measures. It won't be fun.
You said you were in the process of updating the water conservation plan.
Yep.
How soon do you think it'll be available?
So our master plan that we're working on right now, I've asked the engineers to have that completed by this summer. And so what we're going to do a couple of things is we're updating our master plan. We're also working with the Division of Drinking Water to come up with our actual water use because the legislature did some changes there. And so we're actually going back and looking at actual use. And we're also going to be updating our impact fee plan this year too. So it's pretty aggressive. But when I see the consequences coming, the community, we as a community need to be ready for that. And so I hope the draft is supposed to be out in June, and then the final one should be out by the end of September. And so once I get that in June, then I'll mostly be breaking out to your staff and to you and whoever wants, because I think it's essential to see that.
Questions, council?
On the impact fee, a few years ago, that was targeted to hit, I think, 16,000. Is that still the plan? Is it open? I mean, it's moving up $1,000 a year. Where does that stop? What are you targeting?
So right now, for us to supply water for a new equivalent residential connection, it costs about $18,000. And so the board at the time did not want to just say $18,000. They thought that was too much, too quick. And so they decided to ramp it up at $1,000. And they didn't want to take it to the full 100%. So they basically said, let's get it up to about $16,000. And so at the time, they adopted that plan to ramp it up $1,000 till we get about $16,000. We'll be re-looking at that specifically with this new infrastructure project that we're coming online and looking at that. And so about every 5 years, we want to go back and look at that. So right now, the plan is there'll be another $1,000 until it gets up to $16,000, and then we'll just match inflation. But with this new impact fee analysis we'll be revisiting that this summer. I've already reached out to the Southern Home Builders Association and requested them to be very involved in that process so they know and understand what we're doing. So we're kind of hoping to adopt some unique things. So right now we kind of go in and say, okay, this is equivalent residential connection. So, here's your fees. We're looking at maybe going to like lot sizes. So if you have like a 6,000 square foot lot, this is your fee, and kind of gauging more towards what might actually be used on the lot instead of just saying equivalent residential unit. We'll have to see how that goes. And it's actually been very interesting to look through the data. Some of this data we never had before, and now we're getting it. And so we're able to kind of dive deep into those numbers. So.
You think it's going to go up?
So if you can tell me where inflation is going to go, I'll tell you if it's going to go up.
I just saw that 41 million go to 60
I know.
right before my eyes.
I know. And it's tough. I know I get a lot of questions about the Lake Powell pipeline. What's that going to cost? And like with the Lake Powell pipeline, it's really comes to the price of steel. It's going to be a steel welded pipe. And if you can tell me what the price of steel is going to be at in 7 years, we both could be multimillionaires. And that's what's tough. So right now, when I ask the engineers, what happened to the cost of this reservoir? And it really is, you look at our big excavation companies, they've got so much work, they don't know what to do. And they're like, hey, if you get a couple of people bid, you should just be happy that they bid in this environment. Now, if the economy slows down and those contractors get hungry,
Change.
Yeah, it can change. And it's tough because like our regional pipeline that we built out there by Sand Hollow Reservoir, that came in a couple $1 million under. So, and we're actually having discussion, maybe we wait to build that for a little bit to see what the economy does. Do we wait for the economy to slow down a little bit? But it kind of gets to that question, how close do I get to that edge of water use? And I don't like getting too close to that. So
One other question, the treatment plant being built up by Gunlock, that is supplying water where?
So that's the St. George City treatment plant. So they're up there treating, so they have some groundwater wells up there, but it's high in arsenic. And so we also have the same thing. So we're actually building almost two exact same. So St. George City's building that one, and we're building one over by Sand Hollow Reservoir. And it's actually been a good way to save costs. So that one will be supplying water to St. George City. But with the regional supply agreement, we can actually tap into that and pump water to Ivans. So in reality, that water treatment plant that St. George City is building will supply water to mostly St. George, some water to Ivans, a lot of water to Kayenta, and there's a possibility that a few water molecules could actually leak over here to Santa Clara. So it just depends on the system's so dynamic. If all of a sudden this goes out, I can pull water off that line and pump it up to the Sand Hollow wells, and then those Sand Hollow tanks, and those Sand Hollow water tanks could come down here in this community.
It's kind of interesting that you mentioned Quail Lake being built in the 80s and 90s, Sand Hollow and stuff. The cost then to the county residents, percentage-wise, it would be interesting to know what the Lake Powell pipeline is, comparatively speaking, because we built those for the future, knowing there were people coming. With the Lake Powell pipeline, the same thing is true. We're building for the future, but at the same time, ensuring what we have now.
Yeah.
And what difference does it make what it costs? If we run out of water, we'll pay whatever it needs to be to have water.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting that cost is relative in what we're doing and when we're doing it.
Every generation in our community since the pioneers have got here was planning for the future for their children's with water. And every single water structure really was beneficial by the next one. There's an old saying, we all drink out of wells that we didn't dig. So.
With the change in the federal government recently, is that change what you expect to happen, the Lake Powell pipeline and other projects that we have?
So we're already feeling the effects of that. So the Tokerville Reservoir or the Ash Creek project, that was supposed to be published in the register. The Biden administration came in and stopped it. Now, in fairness, they stopped everything. They said everything, we're just going to shut it down and lock it up till we have a chance to review. So we're hoping that one will be reviewed, but there has definitely been a change, and it affects us a lot. So because
you think it'll affect the pipeline?
yes, it will. we're trying to anticipate that. I mean, we have new people and we're trying to anticipate what questions they may have. And so we're trying to respond to that too. What's tough is the people coming in are so like new in these positions that a lot of times they don't know what questions to even ask us. But yeah, we are feeling the effect on all of our projects.
Any other questions, council?
Seriously, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Let me give you my cell phone number. It's 435-231-3874. And if you have questions or if you hear a concern, I'm surprised at all the rumors out there and all the things that kind of come up. And so I like to answer those very quickly. You know, one night I got a phone call at 11 o'clock at night saying that the Gunlock Reservoir was going to breach or fell. So me and Sheriff Pulsford jumped in his vehicle and did 80 miles per hour up the Gunlock Road. And what happened was somebody called dispatch and said, hey, we think the Gunlock Reservoir is going to overflow. And there's that spillway where we create those waterfalls. And that's what the person called, just to say, hey, they're going to start overflowing. There's no big deal. Just let dispatch knows. The dispatch person took that as the dam's going to fail. And so it's good to stomp those things out really quick. So I like doing that. So please contact me and I look forward to working with you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate Zach taking the time to come out and kind of bring council to date or up to speed. He did the same with the Mayor's Association recently and look forward to more. Keep us in the loop.
Well, I'm right here in your city,
There
so
you go.
you know where to find me.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Zach. Okay, item C2, consider approval of Santa Clara City Municipal Wastewater Planning Program, MWPP, annual report. Jack?
Thank you, Mayor. Each year, we have to fill out this municipal wastewater planning program annual report. Dustin does it. I've reviewed it and everything looks correct and pretty much everything in there, I believe, is answered yes. I think we've done a great job and the council in planning and preparing our system, our sewer system, wastewater system. And so we just need to approve this by resolution and then send it to the state. And if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Questions for Jack? Is there a copy of the resolution in there?
No, there's not a resolution in there.
So we just need to approve the planning program annual report.
Yeah, we can bring back the actual resolution for adoption.
Okay. Questions, council?
On the 2020 impact fee that's left blank, is that intentional? It's under part 4, fiscal sustainability review.
Part 4.
Part 4, yeah, it's a couple pages down. Right,
There.
down a little bit more.
Right
That
there.
box is empty.
Have you completed impact fee study in accordance with the, in the last 5 years? We have done one in the last 5 years, yes.
Starting
And
with this box here, though,
It's that box right there.
just what is our stormwater impact fee
This would be your wastewater.
or wastewater? $358 and like 17 cents, I believe.
Okay.
Check under part 5.
Yeah.
Go down a little bit. There's a project or a dollar amount slated for 2031 to 35. $500,000 project to increase capacity. Just curious, what's the project?
Those are in the up in the wash, the pipeline coming from Ivans, coming down in the Tuacahn Wash.
Is that upsizing or putting in a parallel line or something?
Upsizing, yeah, or putting in a parallel line.
Okay.
And that's probably going to have to happen here in the next few years, maybe next 3 or 4 years. And that's in our capital facilities plan. That's where those numbers came from.
Other questions, council? Okay, if there's no other questions, then you want a motion tonight or want to wait for a resolution?
Mayor, I'll make a motion.
We can do it. We can approve the plan without the resolution and bring it back.
Okay,
That'd be just fine.
I'll take it, Ben.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the Santa Clara City Municipal Wastewater Planning Program Annual Report pending the resolution that will come later.
Got a,
Do you want to include the addition of the impact fee amount?
Yeah, and include the addition of the impact fee cost of what was?
I believe it's $358.17, I believe.
That's it.
Second.
got a motion by Ben and a second by Lena to approve the Santa Clara City Municipal Wastewater Planning Program Annual Report with those changes as noted. Any question on that motion? Let's do roll call. Ben?
Aye.
Lena?
Aye.
Jarrett?
Aye.
Danny?
Aye.
Wendell?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Jack. Number 3, consider adopting a proposed amendment to the Santa Clara City Code Title 17 zoning, section 17.68.40 plan development standards and requirements to add a new section to establish density equivalents for assisted living facilities and approve ordinance 2021-04. Mr. Nicholson, council, we asked Bob to go back and look at this to try and clarify some of the existing language in there with the, we've got a couple of assisted living centers that are approaching the city, and we just wanted to clarify in the ordinance how to do the density equivalents. So that wasn't a question anymore. So Bob?
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is a continuation somewhat, I guess, of the work meeting we had back on February 3rd, Planning Commission and City Council, where we talked about this issue. Again, just as a refresher, in the Santa Clara City Zoning Code, the PD residential and the PD commercial are the two zones that would allow for an assisted living project. And as the mayor said, we have two pending before the city. The one, again, we've seen a couple of times. I think they call it the retreat at Santa Clara. It's down here in the valley. And they're coming back to the Planning Commission, I think next month is the schedule. And then we have one that's in an existing, the one here is going for a zone change. As you recall, they're trying to get the PDR zone. We have another one, the point, they call it the point at Sunbrook, which is zoned planned development residential. That was property that Mr. Keller annexed to Santa Clara. And at that time, it was zoned planned development residential. So those are kind of working their way through the process. They've been to TRC a couple of times. Questions come up is about density. And so we've tried to come up with a solution on how we treat the units, the density in an assisted living project. And thanks to Matt for drafting this ordinance. The state code allows cities to adopt what they call a temporary land use regulation. And that's what's before you tonight, to adopt this on a temporary basis. It can't exceed 6 months. We think it'd probably be much shorter than that by the time the Planning Commission and Council could adopt the final version. But the state code says the cities by ordinance can adopt by declaring or finding as compelling public interest. Matt has drafted that ordinance for us. Maybe I'll just summarize what the draft ordinance consists of, and then Matt can cover the temporary or the ordinance itself. So we've suggested this would be an amendment to the PDR chapter, the PD zone, I should say. This would be an amendment to the PD chapter, which is chapter 68 in the zoning code. And it would be under section 40, paragraph H, we call it density equivalency for assisted living and senior independent living units. Matt has done a good job of just summarizing kind of the language, and which is basically that if it's an assisted living, or I should really say a senior independent, because I think that's where the senior independent living units, wherein they have their own kitchen facilities, those units would be treated as a typical residential unit. So the ratio is basically 1-to-1. They would be treated as a standard condo or townhome unit. For the assisted living or senior independent living without their own cooking facilities, that is, they rely on a central dining facility for their meals, or the meals are delivered to their room, the equivalency ratio would be 2 assisted living units or independent living units equals 1 standard residential unit. And we've made a note that a microwave or small refrigerator or sink would not be considered as their own cooking facilities for the purpose of this defining what is kitchen facilities. And we may have to fine tune that a little more. But, we discussed this idea. We had some different ratios at that work meeting. I think the council members felt more comfortable after doing the research. I think that the 2-to-1 for those units that rely on the dining facility for their food is a good ratio. It makes sense. It is, out of the 3 we found, 2 of them had been using that same formula. One was Kirkland, Washington, another one Fort Myers, Florida. So I don't know if you have any questions. That's a quick overview. I think, as we noted at the work meeting, in many cities, such as even St. George, the issue typically doesn't come up because their density in their PD zone is 20, in the PD residentials, 22 units per acres. 22 units per acre. So Santa Clara's 8 at base up to 12. So you can see there's a big difference. And so for that reason, a lot of cities, if your density's up there high enough, then you're not, this equivalency issue wouldn't normally come up. So I don't know if you have any questions on the issue. Again, we don't think this will take 6 months to resolve, but it would have to go through a public hearing process at the Planning Commission and then come back to the council as a final draft. We think that's probably more likely in around 2 months rather than 6 months. So
during this 6-month period, anybody applying wouldn't be able to apply
until
we come up with the ordinance.
Well, the way we look at it, and I don't think the state code is real clear, if they comply with the pending regulation, if somebody came forward with complying with this, then we don't see a reason to hold them up.
Complying with not the one that's being studied, but the one that we have in place already.
No, the one that's being studied,
Yeah,
the one
that's
before
in
you,
here.
the one before you tonight.
In the temporary ordinance.
So why are we, if they can come in with an application and be accepted, why are we studying it rather than making the adoption? I don't understand.
Well, partially a timeline. To adopt this thing that's before you tonight, normally it would go to a public hearing before the Planning Commission. They'd have a public hearing and get to the council. That's 3 to 4 weeks. And we thought it'd be good to get this adopted a little sooner, since we have 2 projects kind of knocking on the door.
If they were to apply today, they would be processed under the existing ordinance.
That's what I'm asking. We're not suspending the existing ordinance until we get the new ordinance adopted, correct?
Well, what we're doing is essentially temporarily adopting the proposed ordinance until we can get the procedure done to make it permanent. That's the way it's written. So in other words, what Bob has summarized for you tonight is what this temporary regulation implements. So if a new application comes in, if you adopt this that's proposed tonight and a new application comes in, they would comply under this this density equivalency that Bob has explained.
Even though it's not finalized.
Until we get something finalized. And when you finalize it, you can either finalize it as it's currently written, or you can, once it goes through the process with the planning commission and back to you, it may look totally different. But this is a stopgap essentially so that these current applications that are coming in can be addressed.
I thought under this kind of condition, there was a moratorium during that adoption period so that you don't.
That's one way to do it. Yeah. So one option you have is to adopt a temporary moratorium. But the way the state code reads is you can adopt a temporary moratorium and just put a halt on all development, or you can temporarily adopt the ordinance that you believe that you will have once it goes through the process of the planning commission and the city council, and that will be in effect. You just can't have it in effect longer than 6 months.
Why don't we just leave it the way it is for new applications under the old ordinance until we adopt the new ordinance? So basically, we have a moratorium on the new ordinance and they apply under what's already in place.
That's definitely an option. That's up to the council.
But the existing ordinance doesn't have any definition.
Yeah, that's the issue is the existing ordinance doesn't provide any equivalency for an assisted living. The only thing we have in our ordinance is assisted living and I forget the rest of it, but assisted living is essentially in there as a conditional use in the PDR zone. But there's nothing in there about how you calculate the density. So the idea is we're going to implement this equivalency temporarily so that applications that are coming in now can get processed, can go through, can be considered. And that gives you time and the planning commission time to consider whether that's something you want to do permanently if you want to do something different.
But if we've already approved it and we determine that that's not what we want, they get to go ahead anyway.
If you approve them under that temporary regulation, yes.
That makes sense. I would think that during the moratorium, during the period of the 6 months, there'd be a moratorium. It could apply under the old ordinance.
You can make this a moratorium, but that's not what is currently proposed in front of you.
Question I have, we've gone through this a couple of times now, and I'm getting the impression that the same people are going to come back again under this new proposal.
My understanding is
how will
they are
that
coming.
change for them? Will it make it possible for them to come in with the density that they currently have?
Well, I can
and
give
still meet this new process.
I can give you my take on it, and then if Bob or Mayor, I'm sure you might have some thoughts too. But if you recall, when they came in previously, one of the big questions was, how do you count the units? How do we calculate the density? We didn't really know how to address that. I mean, it was sort of a moot point anyway, because they ended up getting denied. But when they come back, that same question is going to be there. So this proposed temporary regulation addresses that in the way that Bob has described.
Under this new regulation, would they meet that regulation with what they've shown us?
I don't know the answer to that.
And it depends again on how many of the units have their own cooking facilities. And in talking to the applicant for this retreat, they have some. I don't exactly know the number. I sent this draft to them a week ago and kind of then had a phone call. I said, if your units have kitchen facilities, then they are would be considered as just a typical dwelling unit. If they rely on that central dining facility, which essentially they're just a room, that they have basically a room. If you think about assisted living or memory care, people aren't typically driving. They have a room and they go to the central dining facility or have their meals delivered. Question is, should one of those rooms equal a standard dwelling unit? That's the issue we were struggling with. And so this would say, no, two of those units that don't have their own kitchen facilities would equal one standard unit. That equivalent residential unit issue idea. So,
So I see an issue if I want to create density, I'll put more beds, less kitchens, and I can have the same density I had before. So to me, the adjustment ought to be, let's look at the ordinance, determine if that's what we want to do, which we do want to have assisted living in Santa Clara. I think everybody agrees there. But why don't we study it, put a moratorium out on it for 6 months, and then allow applications once we've determined what to do. Other than that, they can apply under the old ordinance.
well, the old ordinance, I guess under that one, I assume you're thinking that one room would equal one house. Or is that what you're thinking? Bedroom, one room is equal to a.
If it has a kitchen we're talking about, even now, it would be one.
Yeah, it'd be, one room would be equal one dwelling unit.
Right.
I'm sure that would not work for them. Probably won't work for very many.
It doesn't work for anybody.
I don't
We-
think,
we've
I don't
spent-
think you'd see any assisted living come to Santa Clara.
We've spent, this is our third
Right,
meeting
that's-
on this.
That's why we're reviewing the ordinance to set some standards, but I don't see that we have it suspended and during a 6-month period while we're studying it, we're allowing applications to come in, even though we haven't established what we're going to do.
Why would it take us this is our third meeting. This is the issue I've got is we already gone down this road. We had a full discussion on this and they've come back with clearly what we directed them last time because we don't have clear direction and under the ordinance we've got, it wouldn't make sense for anybody. So to turn around and tell somebody, wait 6 months while we figure it out is not, it just doesn't make sense. This is exactly what we directed in the last meeting. And I under our ordinance now, it doesn't work. Even under this, I question, I mean, this is still well below St. George and other, when you talk about densities, but at least it's clear direction on going, okay, because that was a big question. That's what, with Jarrett in there, the plan that came in on the first proposal was missing a lot of information and density was probably the biggest thing. There was some lighting and that, but we don't have real clear direction to say it needs to be 1-to-1. It won't work. 2-to-1's probably not, probably pushing it, but that was the direction we gave in our last work meeting to go from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1, which is exactly what's there. So to say we need
Right.
6 months, I don't think that's a good move because I don't think this is a bad ordinance. I think this is what we want per the discussion we've had. So
I know, but that's what they're suggesting is that we don't do this for 6 months, but yet we suspend our ordinances and review applications for the next 6 months, depending on what we want to do, rather than putting the ordinance in place and then letting them apply through the ordinance. I don't understand why we would do that.
because they would have no direction on design or anything else on what to do. I mean,
Well, I know, so why don't we forget about suspending it and just adopt it if that's what we're going to do?
I think there's a process. I'm assuming there's a process I don't know.
It has to have a public.
I think there'd have to be a public hearing and that. So I mean,
That takes 4 weeks. You go through the public hearing process and bring it back for an ordinance change. It doesn't take 6 months to do that.
The 6 months is the maximum length allowed under the law. We can it can happen with any kind of a time frame. By approving this tonight, you've put something in effect today. So an application comes in tomorrow, pays his fee, they have to live within this standard. Right now, we don't have a standard. So it's up for debate if they do that, but it vests under the ordinance that's in place. And so you wouldn't necessarily be able to force this on them. You'd have to, stay within your standing on your review when it comes back. This would put something in there to address the ERU issue, the density issue with that deal. And if they met that, then they could proceed through the normal process. If we meet quickly and in 4 weeks decide to change it, it's going to take longer than that for planning commission to look at it. They only meet once a month. It takes a while to get on the agenda, then it takes a while to come to us. So it's going to be a couple months, I think, if it's on a fast track to get back here. And if planning commission may come back and say, we feel like this needs to be higher or something like that. It may be 3. That chart that Bob showed us in the work meeting or last time we talked had a variety of equivalent of ERUs based on the beds. Planning commission may look at this and come back with a higher number.
So does the planning commission look at this if a new application comes in before it comes to the council?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, if you adopt this as a temporary regulation, this would be in effect for up to 6 months.
And so they would follow the regular process of planning commission
Yes.
to the council.
Yeah. And let me be clear about something. The only reason that we're doing it this way or that we're proposing to do it this way is we're attempting to carry out what seemed to be the instruction of the council quickly, so that we didn't have to, wait for the planning commission to do its work. And if you would rather wait for that, there's no issue with that other than you're going to have applications that come in that won't have this established, that it'll still be an open question as to how you count those units. So, but that's totally up to the council. This is an issue that's entirely within your jurisdiction.
So what are the requirements we have to meet legally in order to put in a temporary land use ordinance?
Just simply to adopt an ordinance. There's no required public hearing. And the balancing of that is the fact that you can do it without a lot of public input, but you can only do it for 6 months.
But there doesn't have to be like an underlying public safety issue or anything like that we have to identify?
Well, if you'll take a look at what's in the proposed ordinance, and I know you didn't have a chance to look at this very much prior to the meeting, but there is a standard in the code that says there has to be a compelling countervailing public interest. And I think that you're justified, in my opinion. And so what's written in the ordinance there tries to capture that, that this is an important public use, that it's something that's of potential benefit to the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Santa Clara to have this kind of a use. And those findings are all laid out for you. Again, this is totally up to you guys. So if you want that to say something else, if you want to say less than that, that's fine too. But those findings are an important part of the ordinance.
Well, as you read the ordinance, that's exactly what we determined in our work meeting was if there's kitchen and eating facilities, it was 1-to-1.
Right.
And if it's beds, it's 2-to-1. And that, to me, section 2B basically says that.
Right.
And that's what we'd be looking at in dealing with any new project.
Correct.
And I think that's the whole point is just the time. Even on a fast track, we're looking 90 days. And I think it just gives clear direction to staff and those in the projects. And again, from the development side, I can respect that they'd like some clear direction because design time right now, if there's anything out there that's taking the longest, it's in the design, whether it's, project design or, civil or things like that. It's just taking time right now. So again, I think the direction's clear. I agree. I think if this changes at all, it's probably a higher number. I think this is a number we were all very happy with but it's a number that the way it's drafted just gives clear direction now, allows us to take the process to finalize the approval and yet the applicants the ability and staff to know what needs to happen.
I think the ordinance is exactly what we're looking for. I just don't understand why we need to suspend anything for 6 months and just the city council review it.
Up to 6 months. Like I said, I think we're looking at closer to 2 to 2.5.
I think the important issue for me is that we put something in effect that they have to measure against and that they can measure against, where right now it's nebulous. I mean, we look at the ERUs when they're doing their design for their parking, for their traffic impacts, they're looking at ERUs. And they need a way to define that ERU so that they can do those studies appropriately. The assisted living for one bed is only 2.66 trips, but if we treat it like an apartment unit, it's twice that, 3 times that. So it ends up being a real hard impact on that project. If by defining it, they know that before they apply their application. So it's defined. They're not guessing how we're going to treat it. It's defined in the ordinance. The planning commission may look at it. They may go through the public hearing process and solicit input. They may come back and raise that, maybe 3 beds for ERU, make that recommendation to council. Council can consider the same evidence that's presented at the planning commission meeting and public hearing and make that decision. And that'll happen probably over the next couple of months. But if an application is a complete application is submitted within that time, we have to process it under the ordinance. It doesn't have to retrofit to the new ordinance if they've already submitted their application, right?
Right.
Well, that's to me,
That's the advantage of doing the temporary is it puts that ERU question in place for right now. It can change in the future like any ordinance can change in the future, but there's something to measure it against today.
So I have a question. So I noticed like the Fort Myers, Florida zoning code is based off of beds. Doesn't have anything to do with cooking units. I was curious why we chose cooking facilities. I just see a spot where a developer comes in and they put 5 bedrooms behind 1 door, and that's just considered 1 unit. They get a ton of density out of it, but there's 5 beds in that 1 unit. So should we look more at beds versus, because even Mayor just right now talked about beds. There's 2 beds in that unit. That's considered 1 residential unit, but right now they could put a whole bunch of beds in 1 unit, not put cooking facilities and get, I don't think that's our intention, right? Or is there something special about cooking facilities that really sets that out that we understand what's going to happen in that unit?
I think the Fort Myers also, I don't know, maybe it wasn't in the little memo, but they use cooking facilities. Most of them use cooking facilities as a key mark between whether it's considered a standard unit or, deserves to be, a 2-to-1 ratio or something. So as I recall reading the Fort Myers, it also had the same thing on cooking facilities. That was a pretty standard breakdown.
I guess again, I'm just seeing like they do like 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms that have a lot of impact to our water, but they're not cooking, so it's only counted as 2-to-1. Does that make sense? Am I just seeing that wrong? Or
Well, yeah, I mean that I don't have all the answers. I am not an expert on assisted living. It's there's a lot to it, and we probably need a little time to fine tune it. I think most of what I understand, and we're going to have to, and I've reached out and I've sent the ordinance to the people who are pursuing the point at Sunbrook, the developer, and I haven't heard anything negative back. But again, most of these one bed per room is standard. 1 bed per room. Sometimes they'll have 2, but more typical, at least as I understand, it's one room and one bed.
It also comes down to assisted living or memory care versus independent living.
Right.
So that when you get the kitchens, you end up with basically an apartment where generally they're there. A couple of independent living where some or a lot of them have driving, privileges still, where the others do not. When there's not cooking, they're usually confined to the facility itself. So I think I think that's how it's based on that. I've yet to be I have a sister that runs these all over the West, and I've yet to be in any that I've seen more than 2 beds. So I can't imagine they're putting like a bunk room in there. I just don't think anybody would. That's not how they operate. But I think the kitchen is based off the care, whether it's independent care or assisted living.
I just don't know why we don't process the ordinance and forget about the temporary. Doesn't make any sense to have a temporary suspender ordinance and do anything other than move forward with what we're talking about.
So can I just respond to that, maybe, Councilman Drake? The retreat at Santa Clara is pursuing, they want to be back on the March Planning Commission agenda. If we don't,
How long do they get? Can they come back every single month after you've been denied? I thought there had to be a significant change. Are we creating the change so that they can come back?
no. we're
Can I
not.
address that? You want me to address that, Bob?
Sure, go ahead, Chris.
So whether they have established a significant change or not is determined by the Planning Commission. So they can come back to the Planning Commission as much as they want and ask them to say, yeah, we agree that there's been a significant enough change that you can be reconsidered. The Planning Commission voted and determined, yes, they've changed their application enough that they can be reconsidered. So it's now, as I understand it, now it's going back to the Planning Commission to be reconsidered, and then it'll come to the council. I mean, under the ordinance, I guess they can do that as much as they want, but I doubt the Planning Commission is going to keep, saying that they've had a significant change. But that's who makes that determination.
And what I'm saying is, if we're going to adopt the ordinance, we can have the Planning Commission have their public hearing. We can adopt the ordinance as quickly as they can go to the Planning Commission and move it forward to come to the city council. It doesn't make any sense.
The application, if the application is vested, doesn't need planning commission approval. All it needs to do is be a complete application to qualify under the existing ordinance.
Well, and I should probably clarify a couple things. That project isn't even technically going to be subject to this because their application is already in and on the agenda. It's going to be considered under our existing ordinance. So regardless of what you do tonight, that project is going to be considered under our existing ordinance.
And I'm not even talking about that particular project. What I'm just saying is, it looks to me like the time process to adopt the ordinance is almost the same as the time process if an application comes in.
Right, but to the mayor's point, if you don't have the regulation in place when their application comes in, then the regulation wouldn't apply to them.
No, they're going to the old application.
Right. And the other thing I'd just say, Denny, is just in response to something you said earlier, you said something about suspending our ordinance. This doesn't do anything to our ordinance. Our ordinance remains in effect. The only thing this does is it adds a definition of how you count the units. Whoever comes in with a new application, they still have to comply with everything else in our ordinance. That's literally the only thing this does.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that was clear.
So when these people come in a third time and under the old ordinance, will they, if we approve this tonight, will they be able to use this as a guideline for them in the future?
I think it could be used as a guideline to give them a sense of what the city wants, but we couldn't require them to comply with this because their application is already in and arguably complete.
Is the application complete? Fees are paid and they've received the additional elevations and stuff?
Yeah, my understanding is that they paid today, or I don't know for sure on that, but I think it was either to be paid today. That's why I was wondering, yeah, because paying the fees is part of getting the complete application. This has been, on the circuit now here for a couple of weeks before the work meeting. And they were either going to pay the fees today or tomorrow. And these tomorrow. But I don't know if they are actually vested under, since the application technically was maybe today or about tomorrow, for this then out there.
Yeah, but it's a good point. And I was assuming that their application is complete because I understood they were coming to the next planning commission, but maybe it's not.
Well, I think it is, if they had the exhibits, the question was they just need to pay the fee.
Yeah, Chris has stated that they came in today paying fees because they needed to pay them in order to get on the planning commission. They had to be paid before we would put them to the public notice.
But why is that even the issue? And I'm confused as all get out because you're okay with the ordinance, but you keep bringing up this project under which one they'll fall under. If we're okay with the ordinance, the process will take place. Are we not? Are you not okay with it, or are you just not okay with that specific project? I'm really confused down here. What's getting said? Because we spoke on this. Forget the project. Are we okay with the ordinance?
I'm okay with the ordinance. My problem is suspending the process to come straight to the city council. I think we're abandoning public hearings.
That is not happening. They are going to a public hearing before they're starting over from ground zero. They're starting anew. Public hearing will be held probably in March 11th. And then they'll come on to the council as if this is basically a brand new project. It went through the process, council denied it. They're starting over from scratch.
I think Denny's talking about the ordinance, not the project.
Oh, well, the ordinance,
But it's the same answer. I mean, in order to make this permanent, it's still got to go, it's got to have a public hearing at the planning commission, then it'll come back to city council. That, like I said, the only reason this is before you tonight is to put it in place temporarily while that process goes forward. But if the council's not comfortable with that, that's totally fine. That's up to you guys.
And I think kind of my struggle is I'm looking at our the current current ordinance, and in that project plan elements section, it says that the developer has to indicate the number of residential units and or square footage of floor area of non-residential uses by type. And so it's just, I think we have to provide a little more guidance on that. If it's not a regular house, if it's not an apartment, if it's not things that we see all the time, how does the developer know what number to put in there? I think that's kind of what the core of this is, right? Our ordinance isn't quite there. They can kind of guess and throw something out at us, and the council could say, well, that sounds about right, and then we could approve it or deny it based off that. But by putting this in, it's just going to help the developer at least kind of know what we're thinking is reasonable, what our residents would want in that area.
And again, this applies only in the PD's residential zone,
That's correct.
not in a regular residential.
Right.
That's the only place where these facilities can be located is in the PD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're listed there as a conditional use.
Question I have, and maybe it's a dumb question, but we have a community in the valley that have gone through this 2 times now with public hearings. And apparently we're going to go through it again. I'm just wondering what the people think.
Are you talking about that
That
particular
particular
project?
project. I assume that that's the project that's going to go before the for the planning commission this next time, right?
That's my understanding, yeah. And it sounds like they've paid their fees, and so arguably they're vested under our current ordinance.
I just wonder what our community thinks when it's been denied twice and they come back again. I don't understand.
And all I can say to that, Wendell, is they came back to the planning commission and they convinced the planning commission that their application had changed enough that a reconsideration was warranted. So that was a decision of the planning commission.
How was the vote in the planning commission? Was it unanimous?
I don't know the answer to that. You guys remember?
You know,
I believe it was, there was one nay vote. The rest were in favor of seeing the application.
any other questions, council? Comments?
I think having direction is a really good idea right now, at least temporarily. I'm not so sure I'm sold on the numbers. I think they need to be a little different given our ordinance, but I'd be willing to make a motion to approve the temporary resolution. So I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed amendment to the Santa Clara City Code Title 17 zoning section 1768.40 plan development standards and requirements to establish density equivalents for assisted living and approve ordinance 2021-04.
Second.
I've got a motion by Lena and a second by Ben to approve the proposed amendment to the Santa Clara City Code and approve ordinance 2021-04 as presented. Question on that motion?
I was just saying, does it need to be said that this is on a temporary basis, even though the ordinance clearly says that? It says it's, not to exceed 6 months.
I can amend my motion to state that it's a temporary ordinance. Are you good with that, Ben?
I'm good with that. It does state it in the first line there, so it's.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Is an ordinance roll call, Ben?
Aye.
Lena?
Aye.
Jarrett?
Aye.
Benny?
Nay.
Wendell?
Nay.
On my count, the ayes have it 3-2. Ordinance passes. Staff reports, mayor and council reports. Ben?
Man, I had like 20 of them, but I thought we were going to be done a little earlier. So I'm just going to cut them short, Mayor. One thing I did, first off, the cameras, maybe I didn't notice them last time. Those are, this is really nice. The picture,
Oh, yeah.
probably didn't
just-
pay attention last time, but it's really good.
Yeah, just,
So-
really kind of got working this afternoon. They've been working hard trying to get them for today, but yeah, it'll be,
It's a great picture. It was, yeah, well done.
it's very complicated though.
So-
Which is why Christelle sat up here tonight, because as I was going through a lot, I tell it, the young generation and understood the tech. For some of us, it was just,
Well, and I've watched the different angles you've got and it's really good. So nice work. Good to have. One thing, and again, this will be a discussion maybe for a work meeting down the road, but I think we've all, my boy crashed into somebody the other day and construction and everything, but town's getting busy, not just here, but the entire county and traffic. Traffic's a concern and visibility and things like that. And I get concerned looking on Santa Clara Drive, especially living down here now, just as you come around some of those planters, there are some visibility issues to crosswalks and things like that. Obviously, we've got a proposed light down the road, but I would like to maybe just in a work meeting, have a discussion. We don't have near I'm driving down some of these parkways with the landscape medians and it's visibilities. Some of these, we create our own visit, you know, you throw a live oak or an olive tree in there and you can't see traffic around the corner and things, but I would just like to have a discussion on that. I think traffic, the growth is at such a pace that I just think we need to look at it sooner than later and just, you know, in our plans and what we have out there and turn lanes and just for public safety and that. Again, we may all have that and I just don't understand it, but on that and just an update on Bucksays. So those of you we did make a couple pours early in the morning. Some of you may have got calls on that. They were required just because of the amount. We did try to go through the process and notify the city and we did go to all the residents there. We actually gave them gift cards to Pete's Factory and we gave two of them because they were the most impacted, but we still got emails on it. So I apologize to that, but we did try to follow the process, but moving forward, there won't be any of that. They're finishing the last road cut today for storm drain. Steel went up, trusses are about a month out. And so, but just crazy how fast things are growing. So that's all I've got, Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Lena?
All right. I'll give an update on Dollar Tree in case anyone's interested. I went to visit with the manager of Dollar Tree recently. Nice young man, and got to meet with 3 of his employees. Asked him how things were going. They've only been open about a week. He said they're going really, really well. They're really excited about what's happening. They've had a number of people who live in St. George who have committed to actually traveling to Santa Clara to visit our Dollar Tree because it's so much better than the ones in St. George. So he was pretty excited about that. And he said the only thing is after school, when the intermediate school gets out, they get actually blasted with students who walk in there with their dollar. I guess it's like us going to get penny candy at the fruit stand. They walk in there with their dollar and they're buying ice cream and chip bags. So he said they're really, really busy and they're really glad that they're here. And I told him we were thrilled to have him here. So they are not doing a formal grand opening because of COVID. But if that changes, he said he would be certain to let you know. For LPC, there's been a lot going on. The legislature finishes next week. You've probably received some updates if you look at your email. Some of the biggest issues are the billboard bills that are going through. Today, the Senate Bill 61, which was the real big one, actually failed in the Senate. So I'm not sure we're out of the water, but we might be close. And then House Bill 82, which is the assisted dwelling unit ordinance that the state's looking to adopt. The House did approve the 4th substitute. And if you want me to go into the details of what that includes, they did approve that. And it was in the Senate Rules Committee this morning. I didn't look this afternoon to see if that had come out of that. Basically, I can tell you, it requires the city to allow 75% of any residential zoning to have ADUs. The city can't deny it for size, percentage of house, number of rooms. The only thing you could deny it for is if it's for lots under 6,000 square feet. We can require them to have a business license. It does have to be a 30+ day lease. We cannot require them to alter the appearance of the house. They would have to have 1 additional parking spot. We cannot require them to have a separate meter, and homeowners associations can no longer prohibit them. So those are some of the highlights of that. They're changing some of the enforcement too, so that the homeowners would be able to use like a VRBO site, short-term rental site, to advertise their rental on. And where the city has been prohibited from using those to enforce them for short-term rentals, we would be allowed to use them for enforcement under the ADU rule. So there's some nuances there.
So they eliminated the maximum size on the ADU.
Yeah.
So that would impact our ordinance, right?
What's the bill number on that, Lena?
HB 82.
82. Okay.
I think I sent the one to you and we didn't think it was gonna have much impact, but
Yeah, it sounds
they
like
may have
it's
tweaked
different
it.
though.
Yeah.
I'll take a look.
Like I said, it's on its fourth substitute, and that substitute cleared the House and was in Senate rules this morning. I just didn't look to see what had happened to it. But it will impact quite a bit of our ordinance, I think.
Yeah, the League of Cities, has taken a neutral position on it.
Mhm.
And that's really because without that neutral position, Representative Ward was really not going to negotiate much.
Move
He
it
would
all.
have fallen back to a lot of his other things that he had in there, which you were much more, I mean, you wouldn't have got anything. There would have been no parking, nothing. You wouldn't have been able to do really any regulation on this. And so the league has gone that neutral position, and they've got a committee that is working on negotiating, working with Representative Ward very close.
So there still could be some changes, but his reason for doing it is basically affordability. That's really his whole reason for trying, is he wants more affordable housing, and he thinks his idea is you have all these people who have bought homes, they've raised their children, all their children have left. Now they have these huge homes with nobody living in them. So if we want to increase our affordability, then we need to allow other people to be able to go into those units. And there's probably some merit to that, actually. I mean, we've modified our ordinance to allow more ADUs, so there's probably merit to that.
And the mayor sent me a copy of the fourth substitute, and when I looked at the Santa Clara code is going to take some minor tweaking, but not much.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty much in line with what Santa Clara is already doing, because Santa Clara allows it in the RA and the R110, the accessory units, and so
Any single family zone in the city, you
yeah.
can do it.
So
That's right. And you have to allow it in 75% of that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you determine which area is restricted. That's yet to be determined, I guess.
Yeah, that's the strangest. part of
seems
the whole
crazy to
thing
me.
Honestly, is because how do you track that or
Yeah.
determine that?
Well, and for us, that's an easy number. In college towns, it's even a more challenging number. So, and then the only other one that we're following right now, well, that I'm really closely following right now, is House Bill 98, which is the building regulations for building codes. And that's the plan review process and the 3-day inspection process. Basically, as it stands right now, the 3-day building inspections, if we don't meet that, then the city can opt to hire a building inspector, and we can still receive the fee for that. Or the developer, the contractor, the developer can hire their own. Plan review is basically the same. They'll put the engineer stamp on it if it's not got completed within its 14 days. There's some exceptions to that, but it sounds like it's probably going to clear. I don't know, Brock, if you have a different opinion, but it sounds to me like it's going to.
No, it does. I don't know that this one affects us much with where we're at. I think we're meeting all those 14-day and 3 days. I mean, I don't know that that's a real issue for us at this time, but yeah, I think that one will move on.
Let's see. I think that's all I have from LPC. I think that's all I have from LPC. I did receive a phone call from the recreation director of St. George City. Apparently, there are some issues with the shack, so they're going to have a tri-city meeting, and he hasn't gotten back to me as to the date that's going to happen, but he's going to let me know. And then the last thing is, and this is just a question because I'm unfamiliar, I've never heard of one. Have we ever had, or would we be open to considering having a youth council?
We have tried back when
Wally
was the city manager.
2008, 7, 8.
We tried, we couldn't get anybody to apply.
Really?
Yeah. They had one in about when I got here in 2009, there was one. We tried in 2010 and I think 2011, went to the high schools and just wasn't interest.
Okay.
But if you want to start up another one, I think it's a great idea and it's got some merit. It was just, nobody was interested.
Okay.
Is it a good time with the COVID situation? Maybe wait till next year instead of this year?
I think if you did it, it would be for
Next year.
next school year.
Yeah.
And if you started talking about it now, but you'd have to get it organized and how
Yeah.
you're going to do signups.
Yeah.
I just think
I've-
there might be some cold water put on it because of what we're in right now.
Yeah. I've looked at actually Kurt Ivy and I were visiting on it because Washington City has one that works really, really well. And then I've been talking with a couple of other city council members in other cities up north and looking at some of their documents and how they handle it. And I think if we can get students who are interested in doing it, I think I would like to pursue it. And I'm happy to go and visit with both the high school, both Snow Canyon and Tuacahn. I think Tuacahn, a lot of those students live in our city too. And so I'd be willing to go and visit with them if it's something we think that we would be interested in doing.
I mean, it has merit. I think it's a good opportunity for the youth.
Well, it just gives them some experience, a lot of service opportunity. It's something they can put on a resume.
And I think by the time school starts next year, the COVID restrictions are going to be relaxed.
Yeah.
The risk will be lower.
And I'm happy to do all the legwork. That's not a problem.
Hey, I go for it.
Okay.
Be what I would tell her.
Okay. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Lena. Jarrett?
Okay, I attended a mosquito abatement meeting and we went over our budget for last year and our new budget, and we were able to put away $91,000, I believe, into our capital facilities budget. So that was good. District is still running very efficiently and they've done some good improvements to their shop. And anyways, things are going well at the district. I did want to publicly compliment the mayor on his State of the City address last week to the chamber. I felt like it was a really good audience. He got some really good questions. You're very well prepared. I really appreciated that, Mayor. And then as an extension of that, Mayor sold the glockenspiel really well at the end.
And then it didn't work.
And then, so there was a pretty good crowd outside waiting to hear it go off. And I had to make an announcement that the wind was too strong. And so the interesting thing though I want to bring up with that is the doors open, the music played, they just didn't spin. And I thought that our little wind meter would just cut the whole thing off, not let them still open. So that might be something we want to look at because the wind was still whipping through and their little things were moving around. And so you might want to relook at that wiring of why the doors still opened even when the wind was going really strong. So it worked out kind of nice for this situation because I could still see the characters and I just had to explain, well, come back and you'll see them spin. But that was just an observation I had with,
Who's over the glockenspiel now?
it's Brad.
Just checking. You two were looking at each other like.
So anyway, so yeah, I was just curious of why the doors opened, I guess, with the really strong wind. So we must have it wired just a little bit wrong or something. I bought that wind meter thing, so I remember what it looks like and everything, and that's all I have to report.
Did you want to say something about the glockenspiel? You're grabbing the mic. You're okay? Okay. Danny?
We had our meeting with the BLM, the mayor, Jarrett. We talked with, and Jack, with Keith Redstrup from the BLM to discuss the area out where we're proposing a shooting sports area. We asked for boundaries for the ACEC. He's sent maps. Maybe they came through to you. Did they come through to you?
Yeah, Christelle got.
Mine didn't. I couldn't pull my zip or whatever it is.
I can send you a link to it.
Okay. But they're not opposed to it. They think the process now with the new administration may take a lot longer. And the mayor made a comment that maybe we change the boundaries. But we're in the process of working with them, hopefully to get a RPNP for shooting sports park. That's, unless I have other assignments, that's the only one I know of.
We can change that in a hurry. Wendell?
I agree. The mayor did a great job with the chamber. And I was very informed. I learned a few things too. I had a meeting this week with the Washington County Solid Waste District, and because Mayor Pike moved on, they voted on 2 new people to serve on the executive committee. They have, the district has an executive committee because we have like 22 members on the committee. And they basically go through all the items and figure out what's best for us to discuss as a group. And then we have meetings to discuss that as a group. But they elected Michelle Randall and Craig Coates to be on that committee. Another thing that's happened because of COVID, we've had a lot of problems with getting inmates to go out and clean up trash around the county. In fact, they're not going to do it anymore, and UDOT says they're not going to help anymore. So it's been up to the county now to spearhead that project, but the district and the county are working together on a pilot project to do that in the future. I think they decided to hire 2 people to serve, but they're also inviting people to volunteer. We still have volunteer opportunities if we want, and that's supposed to go through the county on their website. Because the recycle program has changed and a lot of the blue cans have come back, they decided to create new routes to pick up things. But Santa Clara is not going to be affected. St. George, Washington, and who else? I think Kirk are all going to have the routes changed, but we won't have any routes changed in our city. That's the main things they discussed.
What percentage of Santa Clara kept the cans? Do we know?
Don't know.
We actually had a good another percentage up. I want to say we're at like 60%, 60 or 7%. They're still.
What were we
in.
before?
We were probably 85%.
Dropped from 85 down to 60.
Yeah, we were 80,
Price
85. Yeah, we had about a 20%.
It didn't affect the minimum price. I mean, if you got so low, and then the price would have gone up. It didn't affect that. They did have 8,300 cans, blue cans returned, and they've got about 75% of those collected. And they'll be used in the future for new homes and somebody that opts in.
They'll burn through those pretty fast, the way things are right now.
Keeps growing, they will.
Okay. Anything else, Wendell?
No.
Thank you. Mayor's meeting on COVID is, I mean, you've been reading the paper, you've been seeing the numbers drop. The number of cases and has been coming down and tracking in the right direction. The hospital has reported some of the lowest numbers hospitalized since August, and they indicated they've got room. Their staff is a lot less stressed now, so things are trending in a positive direction. The health department is still getting bombarded with vaccine requests, trying to get people signed up. If you get asked by somebody if like older people don't have computer skills, they can go to job service. Job service has people and computers. They'll set up there and try and get their shot for them, get their appointment if they can. There's some resource out there that way to help people if they need it. The governor's I think March 1st, 65 and older hit, and we're only about a third of the way through our 70 and older population, and we're going to open it up to 65 and older, so it's going to get even harder for them for the next couple of months. They anticipate getting a lot more vaccine available through the end of March, and so they're hopeful by July that everybody who wants one to be able to get a vaccine.
Are they hopeful with that they will ease mask restrictions?
They've changed and this is really complicated and way above my pay grade, but they changed the governor changed the requirements on when the mask restrictions can be lifted. We need to come down a little bit lower on our cases and then hold that for, I want to say it was 14 weeks or 9 weeks. Then the mask restrictions may be able to be lifted. So they think maybe later this year, but we still aren't there yet. We're still in the high risk or the high spread, whatever they call it now. And, but we are getting down, we're approaching that next step down, that medium step down, but the mask will still be there. Schools are going to wear them through the school year. So,
Mayor, in your call and with Dr. Blodgett on that, has there been any discussion of changing or opening up other avenues or places within the county to do the vaccine that's not just through the public health department, maybe a site like here at our banquet room or somewhere else where people don't necessarily have to run through the whole sign up. They can come and say, I want it.
You can request it.
Okay.
They're still limited on what they're getting. The doses that they get from the state I think they're still fairly limited on. They are going to start getting, Walgreens is starting to get some now. Harmon's is going to start to get some. So you are seeing some of the private pharmacies that are starting to be able to get some of that stuff. Next month, you should see a bunch more vaccines. They've upped the production. We're supposed to get a lot more. It takes some minutes to book out everything that they're getting now, and they're booking out everything that they get. So they're just limited on the amount that they get here. The weather shut them down. They couldn't even do their vaccination last week because of the snowstorm in Nashville. The vaccine was stuck on the ground. Probably a FedEx delivery out of Nashville.
Yeah.
So that should open up. And then I think they will. The hospital opened up they had 1,200 doses, but those just go in minutes.
Uh-huh.
So hopefully they'll get more.
Yeah. I just asked that question because as you say, that 70 older populations, there's still so many out there who want it and are struggling to get it. If we had a site that was not so much of I have to sign up, I can just show up and have your ID to do it. Can we way to
Maybe you could do it.
facilitate that?
Maybe you could do it like like they do the blood drive, where you have one day and we have this many doses, and it's limited to those who live within our city, and that's your one day.
I think you'll get to that, but I think you're looking to May and June
Okay.
before you get to that point.
Okay.
Right now, if you opened it up and brought them over here, half the people here wouldn't live in the city.
Yeah.
And probably a third of them wouldn't live in the county. So it's hard. But I appreciated Zach coming and kind of bringing up to speed on the water. Our water conservation plan is going to have to take a front seat fairly quickly. And I'd like to see us be able to make some efforts to reduce our demand even more. You listen to the mayor's address and you can see it on the map. We don't have a lot of development left after what's currently going through the cycle right now. So 40 years from now, our water need is probably more what we have today. And if we can conserve, we can make that go farther. So I see it not being as huge impact on Santa Clara, but we still need to do our part. So we'll be talking more about that. Probably the biggest news I got since the last meeting, I kind of spoke to each of you individually, is I got a call on Sunday from Jack breaking our pact that we've had for a number of years now. He just broke it and announced he's going to retire. and take a position with his son up north. And he and his wife will be moving at the end of the school year, and we're excited for him. He announced it to the employees on Monday, and once he got past the evil stare from Dustin, I think they took it pretty good. But Jack's done a great job for the city, and he's going to be sorely missed. He's planning on leaving on April 1st. And
It's an
so-
April Fool's joke. It's an April Fool's joke.
But Brock, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or
No, other than, yeah, Jack, 27 years with the city. I joke, to think back, I was a, sophomore in high school. And Jack, and saw the pictures at the mayors and state of the city, and seeing Jack in front of the first bucket truck in 94 they bought, and to where we are today. Jack shared how when he started here with the city, he drove his own pickup truck, is what he had, the only thing he had, until they had a truck, and he went out with Rick Haven on a power engine, couldn't keep the truck running. So they said, finally, go get a pickup truck, go get something that you can rely on. So the city's come a long ways, and
you want to say anything, Jack? Okay, save it. Save it for next month. Well, we appreciate him, and there are some efforts going on the staff level to be able to work into people to be able to take care of the responsibilities that he's had. It won't be easy shoes to fill, but we do have some highly qualified people on staff that I'm hoping will be willing to step up and assume those roles. So I think that's all I had. Brock, did you have anything else you want to do tonight? Anything from the other staff critical tonight? Okay, we don't need executive session. Matt, anything?
Nope.
Okay, if that's it, then I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
A motion by Denny and a second by Wendell to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you